Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CDLC Publisher Training Webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the land on which eBound Canada operates is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. All right, let's begin. On our agenda for today's webinar, first, we'll go through what the CDLC is and our goal with this project. Then we will go into the new filters and facets for the CDLC and how to ensure your titles appear in set categories. We'll get into accessibility to ensure your accessible titles are discoverable on the platform. And finally, we'll have a question period. Don't worry if we run out of time for all your questions, because we will be hosting workshops where we can get into the nitty-gritty. So the CDLC is the Canadian Digital Library Collection, a platform built by eBound to feature Canadian ebooks and audiobooks from independent publishers across Canada. Our goal is to provide librarians with valuable tools to discover and build their Canadian ebook and audiobook collections. We want this to be the platform librarians and educators use whenever they want to add Canadian works to their collection. We built this platform based on feedback from librarians on how they wish to search and discover titles for their digital collections. As we all know, library vendor platforms are great for organic discoverability. So the CDLC has a lot of great features to solve that problem. The first is custom categories. The CDLC features categories not found on most traditional library vendor sites like regionality, accessibility, and more. Librarians want to search for titles based on issues that are not only important to their patrons, but reflect them as well. Next, the CDLC will have, and it does have, specialized filters. Working with librarians, we've developed a set of filters that allow librarians to search for content in the way they want. Once they've narrowed down the category in which they want to search within, they will be able to filter down to get exactly the title they need. One of the most important features of the CDLC is the vendor buy buttons. Once librarians find the book they wish to purchase, each title has direct links to the book on library vendor marketplaces. We have buy buttons for most major vendors like Overdrive, Hoopla, EBSCO, DeMarc, and Palace. The CDLC has other cool assets as well. The CDLC will allow librarians to download searches as Excel spreadsheets, which is really beneficial for librarians who may not be in charge of buying or who may need to wait for funding to become available. And the homepage will feature collections built by librarians and maybe even authors, if we can get some of you publishers to volunteer some authors to build collections. Next, we're going to go into the various filters and facets and the metadata you'll need to have to ensure your titles appear under the right categories and filters. But before we get into the metadata, we're going to have a quick word on creator identity. So this was one of the categories most requested by librarians was creator identity. As the CDLC is a public-facing site, for the creator identity category, we're asking publishers to work with their authors to self-determine identity. Using the spreadsheet provided in the newsletter, and I also sent it in the email today, speak with your authors if they're comfortable being placed under one of the categories, and then they can further self-identify. For example, an author can be under the Indigenous category and further identify as Anishinaabe. Now, we want to stress that this category will always be fluid. Authors can ask to be removed from a category, or ask to be added to a category, or changed to another. If your authors do not wish to identify at all, that is completely okay. As this is a sensitive subject, this will be the only manual category input, as having author permission is extremely important. We will also have a notice on the website that states that all authors who are under the creator identity category have self-identified and respect the wishes of how each creator has self-determined their identity, as well as those who have chosen not to participate. And now we're going to get into what you've all been waiting for, the metadata and the work that you'll need to do there. So I'm going to pass it over to Amanda.
I promise that it's not going to be that much work. It's only a little bit of work. Thank you, Paula. Thanks everybody for coming. Now, as Paula said, this is phase 2 of the CDLC. The old CDLC was actually a pilot project. We're really pleased with it. We think it went really nicely, and we're so appreciative of all the publishers who participated in the pilot, but it's going to be better. On the old CDLC, we had what I think of as sort of 3 special categories. That was browse by subject, which was powered by BISAC, browse by location, which was powered by a publisher assigned for the author location or the setting location, and then browse by special category, which was at the time LGBTQ2S and Indigenous. Now, this was good. It covered a lot of things librarians were asking for, but we knew we could do better and cover more. And we knew we could make it less labor intensive, which I'll get to in a little bit. Right now, our lovely pilot publishers, for whom we are so grateful, are submitting spreadsheets for location, both author location and setting, as well as these custom categories. So they had to send all of this by spreadsheet. But that's not sustainable for any of us going forward, especially since we are planning to add more than a dozen new categories based on librarian requests. So the new CDLC, Paula has already described the new categories, but I want to reiterate that they are going to be super powerful filters. Imagine a librarian. This imaginary librarian is looking for a romance novel written by an author in the 2S LGBTQ plus community, set in Toronto at Christmas, and it has to be an accessible ebook. Using the new CDLC, they're going to be able to filter down to that specific book if it exists. They'll also be able to browse or search by any of these new categories. Now, that first set of categories are the ones Paula spoke about. Those are the categories for creator identities. So you can see the author in the 2S LGBTQ plus community section. As Paula explained, there's no way to pull that from metadata that doesn't come with risk to creators who don't necessarily want to be lumped into that, who don't, or authors who or publishers who aren't using it. There's simply no way to automate that process, and that's the way it should be. So this is the one piece of data on the site that will still be manual. You'll have to fill that spreadsheet out by design. However, we are adding a lot of categories about the book itself. And those are going to come directly from your metadata, your Onyx metadata that you're sending. So the new categories, I'm going to go through those now and let you know how each is powered. But there's a few things to note before we do. The first is that I've shared a couple of screenshots. I want to be clear that any screenshot I share of the new site is a mock-up made by me. I am not a graphic designer. I took a screenshot out of Excel. So please, it's not going to look like that. It will never be that ugly. That's a screenshot from Excel. It's not going to look like that. Second thing to note, this is a top level discussion of the things that you need to add. However, if you want more details or you want to work with me to add the data to some of your titles, you can come to our workshops. I can't promise they'll be super fun, but I think they'll be pretty fun. Sign up by emailing Paula. If you have already signed up for a workshop, great, thank you. I cannot wait to spend some time with you. I will send you an email with an invitation to the Zoom. Tomorrow, you'll get that email in your inbox for the workshop you've signed up for. If you haven't signed up, do so now. All right. The next thing to note is that this metadata is coming from BiblioShare. If you're already sending your ebook data to BiblioShare, that's great. If not, please do get that set up. There are a lot of benefits not limited to the inclusion in the CDLC. If you're an eBound member, contact eBound to see if you're being sent to BiblioShare. If you're not, eBound will help you get it set up. Okay, on to our new categories. Do you remember our librarian? They wanted an accessible ebook that is a romance novel written by an author in the 2S LGBTQ plus community who lives in Ontario. Now, this is going to be powered using the same location data you are already using to power those Canadian flags in other BiblioShare products. You just need to make sure that the information is in your digital products, your ebooks and your audiobooks, not just your print. So some publishers will add it to their print and then not copy it over. Make sure it's copied over so that our librarian can find your author. Great. In CourseSource, this lives in your contributors, your contributor page. So it's just down here on the bottom where I've highlighted the 3 here. Now, you'll notice that I've done more than just Canada. That's because librarians have asked us to be really specific. They want to know more than just Canadian authors. They want to know if a creator is local to them, if they're in their community. So we're going to use all the data you provide here in your contributor location. These menus will be collapsible, so you're not going to see like the world's longest list of small Canadian towns, but we are actually just going to use the text you send us. So if you say they live in the city of Toronto, a new menu item will be made for Toronto and all the Toronto authors will fall under it. If you say they live in a very small town, well, they might be the only one there, but they'll be there and the Port Dover librarian will be happy to see that a Port Dover author is in there. Okay. So the next is subject. So our librarian is looking for a romance novel. This is not that exciting, but as it turns out, BISAC still is really the most useful thing for some things. BISAC is really good about categorizing subjects. And I know that you are all very good about adding BISAC. So just as before, we are going to be using BISAC, but we're going to use a really robust set of filters to drill down. Here's this screenshot from Excel, which I've also made a typo in, so really not a graphic designer at all. But imagine these with little checkboxes, and they'll be able to check off fantasy or action adventure fantasy to see books that have those BISAC codes, and those will be what's displayed to them. Okay, great. The next, and this is the big one, are themes. Our imaginary librarian was looking for an accessible ebook that is a romance novel written by an author in the 2S LGBTQ+ community who lives in Ontario. The book should be set in Toronto at Christmas with Black characters. Those 2 categories are what we are calling themes. These are things that librarians are really looking for, and they're not able to find this information anywhere else in a really systematized way, right? They have to read the descriptions of every book. They can't just filter down to, you know, Christmas romance novels with Black characters. Our pilot, as you remember, included those 2 big asks, which were books about Indigenous people or experiences and books about 2S LGBTQ+ people or experiences. As I said, that was powered by that custom sheet. In our new site, these and these other themes are all going to be powered by Thema. Now, this is the current list of requested themes from librarians. So these are things that librarians have said, we really want to find books about these topics. They are Indigenous, which will have subcategories, 2S LGBTQ+, which will have subcategories, immigrants and new residents with a specific subcategory for refugees, people of color with specific subcategories for groups, holidays and celebrations with subcategories for specific holidays, and finally, homelessness and the unhoused experience. Now, as a reminder, before we go on, this is about the book, not the creators. We're not doing any creator identity here. That was up on those earlier slides. This is simply the book is about Black people, or the book is about the sociology of homelessness. It's not about the creator. It's about the content of the book. Okay, so how do you get your books into these themes? Getting your books into these themes is super important because, again, librarians requested these. They're looking for these. It's as simple as adding thema codes to your relevant books. Now, how do you do that? Well, I know that many of you are already adding thema, and I'm so glad that you are. For those of you who aren't, please go ahead and start doing that ASAP. It's important for us. It's important for other places. It's going to matter more into the future. Let's do it. Included in the email that Paula sent are some great thema resources. It's a Word doc with a list of links. Please go ahead and use it. It's in there. And please do not forget that you can come to the workshops and I will help you. You can bring an ISBN to the workshop and we will work through it one by one to add those thema codes. But for now, a really quick and dirty set of instructions. You want to determine if your book is a good fit for one of our categories. Remember, again, this is about the content of the book itself, not the author's identity. And then you're going to go to the thema browser, which there's a link in the resources, to find relevant categories. So let's say your book is about Christmas. You're going to type Christmas into the search of the thema browser, and it'll pull up a list of any of these codes that have Christmas in it, that are in any way related to Christmas. I think the thema browser is great, by the way. I use it all the time. It's a great tool. So you'll just scan down this list thinking, okay, what is relevant to my book here? Oh, it's just straight up Christmas. It just says this is Christmas. Great. Now, as a quick aside, you would want to click the little asterisk here just to see if there's some tips on how to use this code properly, but we don't need to do that. It's about Christmas. Great. All right. And then let's say we are searching for the next category, which is it's about Black people. There are Black characters. So I've typed Black people into the search, big long list. I'm going to scan and find the ones that are relevant to me. If you clicked into these the asterisks, it would say relating to or characters are, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can just assign these codes. Now, you'll navigate to your book's categories. Once you have these collected categories, you can just click on the code. So the 5PBD, ooh, hard to say. Click on that code and then head on over to your database, which in this case is CoreSource. And you can add the thema that's relevant. So in this case, you can just paste that right into the box that I've highlighted here, and it'll pull up the correct code. So that's CoreSource. Most databases will be similar. And while you're in there, add the rest of the thema too. Don't just add the ones you want for our list, but add some extra as well. Great. Now, I just want to note before we move on here, which is that we haven't fully mapped out thema to themes yet. But please rest assured that your work is not going to be wasted. If you add thema, you're not wasting that work. We are going to be using that strategy I just taught you, where we searched through, to add, to create that map, to say, okay, I've searched for Christmas. Here's the codes that are related to Christmas. Okay, these all go in the Christmas category. So anything you do doing that strategy will help you with this project. Additionally, we'll be looking at eBound publishers metadata to see your thema use cases to build our map. So please enter your data and help us so that we can build the map to match what you're already doing. All right, the next category is location. So our imaginary librarian wanted a book set in Toronto. It's not necessarily by an author who's in Toronto, it's just set there. And once again, we are going to lean on thema for these categories. Thema has location qualifiers, and they're used to describe the setting of a work of fiction or a location that a work of nonfiction is about. So we are going to use those categories. They're super robust, and we're going to be as granular as thema gets. So in this case, there's a thema code. The menu will look like this. You can open up, okay, check mark, I want books in Canada, or I want books in Ontario, or I only want books in Toronto. Great. So in this case, once again, you will use the thema browser to type. You would type in Toronto and it would pull up this code here, and you would just enter it into CoreSource, and then that way your book will be listed in Toronto. So it's as granular as thema gets. If you see a really top level code, add it. The other important thing to note is that you'll be in every category that you set. So if your book is set in both the Muskokas and also in Victoria, add them both and you'll show up under both filters. Okay, so those were almost all of our filters. Thank you. It was a lot. I'm sure many of you have questions. We will have a question period at the end. We will also have workshops. Come to them. I will help you add your thema if you want to. I believe that all of you can do this, right? I think that you all have the capability to add thema. You're already adding BISAC. I know you can add thema as well. It's not challenging, but if you do really just want an excuse to hang out for an hour and work on metadata, please come to the workshop. And if you have questions or you're confused, come to the workshop. All right, now we are going to move on and we're going to talk about accessibility. This is the last of the new filters and facets that we will be adding. It is so important to librarians. This was a big request. It is so important to librarians that their ebooks are accessible to their patrons. And many of us are doing the hard work of making accessible ebooks. We just need to make sure we're telling people that we're doing that work. Finally, the other thing I will note about accessibility is that specter of the EAA is looming, right? At some point, it is going to be mandated that we add accessibility metadata to our ebooks. So you may as well start now and get it on the CDLC while you're at it. Okay. So our imaginary librarian, they are specifically looking for an accessible ebook. Now, we all know that accessible ebook can actually mean a lot of things, right? That's a pretty big and broad category, and it means a lot of things to a lot of people. But we talk to librarians, and most of them are just looking for an ebook that will be available, accessible, and readable by the largest group of their patrons. They're not really sure what all the technical codes mean. They're not really sure what like WCAG AA means. They just know that they have patrons who need to read books in different ways, and they want to make sure that those books will work for them. So we have added simplified accessibility filters. These accessibility filters are based on the really great new accessible metadata display guidelines that came out a few months ago. They're wonderful. If you ever do a project like this, read them. But they recommend for a simplified set of filters, meets accessibility standards, meets minimum accessibility standards, readable in read aloud and electronic braille, and finally, appearance can be modified. Now, there will be a FAQ and FAQ explaining what this means to the librarians. And the full set of accessibility data will still be displayed on the books page for librarians who are looking for really specific features. But these minimum filters will cover the needs of most libraries shopping for the largest number of patrons. Now, I am going to go over the basics of how to add accessibility data, and then I will talk about these 4 filters in specific. Remember, if you need any help adding accessibility data, workshops. I will work with you to add that accessibility metadata. I know many of you on this call have already been to my accessibility metadata workshops, but come to them again if you need more help. But if not, we will be running through those in the workshops. Okay, so the very quick and dirty basics of how to add accessibility metadata. First, you need to download ACE by Daisy. There's a link in the pack. And all of this is outlined in the pack as well. So, don't feel like you've got to scramble to write this down. So download ACE by Daisy, have a copy of your ebook to hand, and then open the accessibility crosswalk, which is a document. It's online. There's a link in the pack. All right. So this is a screenshot of ACE by Daisy. ACE by Daisy is a piece of software made by Daisy. Anybody who makes ebooks or receives accessible ebooks is likely using this software already to check to make sure that their ebooks are not violating accessibility standards, which is what's in this violations tab. However, we are going to use the metadata tab. And then we are going to click on accessibility on the far right, which will allow it to filter by accessible data. This shows all of the accessibility metadata in your ebook. This is not in Onyx. It's not in the metadata that's being distributed to your trading partners. It's just what the person who made your ebook knows about its accessibility. Using this list, we're going to head over into the crosswalk. Again, this is a website. It shows the schema.org metadata, which is what's in the ebook. So the ebook has the schema.org data, and the Onyx data is what's in your course source and is what's in your Onyx data that's being sent out to your trading partners. So the alternative text in schema.org is translated to code 14 from list 196 in Onyx. So now we'll click over to where we're looking at course source, and we can see that code 14 in the ePublication accessibility details is short alternative descriptions, which it would say if the screen was bigger. Now, that was, again, quick and dirty, really fast. That's how you add your accessibility data. It really is that easy once you've figured out where everything is. But again, come to the workshops. I will definitely help you add that information. I have sent you information in the info packet, which will help you do that. And the APLN also has a really good guide to this. So the information is out there. Finally, if you can't make it to a workshop and you do want to add accessibility metadata, just shoot me an email. I will happily give you a hand with this under the guise of helping you get on the CDLC, because we really want librarians to have this information about your books. Okay. The next note is just for Benetech certified publishers. If you are a Benetech certified publisher, this is actually even easier for you. You should still add all of your accessibility metadata using those steps that we just went through. But if you want to get some of that information out ASAP and you don't have time to go messing around with like the crosswalk, you can add the codes for compliance certification by Benetech. Okay. 04 is for EPUB accessibility 1.1 and 82 is for WCAG version 2.2, right? So that's saying Benetech has said that we are certified and all Benetech certified books meet these two certifications. They meet these two specifications. So you can add that to any book that was created after you received your Benetech certification. And that's just a little bit of a faster way to get your front list up to scratch. Okay, so now that we've had a quick rundown of how to add that data, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our filters. Remember, your full set of accessibility metadata will be displayed on your books page. What we're going to talk about here is just for the filters that librarians will use to ensure that your books will work for their patrons. Okay. Credit where this is due. This all comes from the accessible metadata display guidelines document. I did not invent this myself. So that first filter was meets accessibility standards. This is defined as the publication contains a conformance statement that it meets the EPUB accessibility and WCAG 2 level AA standard. We will have a FAQ. This will be in plain language for librarians. It does not necessarily need to be this intense. For our purposes, this means anything with those codes for EPUB accessibility and WCAG levels 2 or AA will be in meets accessibility standards. Anything with codes better than that will also be here. If you're a Benetech certified publisher and you add those 3 codes I listed, you're going to be here for sure. You'll just land there right away. Otherwise, you'll need to go through ACE by DAISY to see if you meet those specifications. All right. The next one is meets minimum accessibility standards. The definition is this publication contains a conformance statement that it meets the EPUB accessibility and WCAG 2 level A standard. So anything already in that accessibility standards or anything that has these slightly lower tier accessibility conformance codes are going to go in this meets minimum accessibility standards. So if you're in accessibility standards, you're also in minimum. The next is readable in read aloud and electronic braille. This is defined as being anything with accessibility code for all non-decorative content supports reading without sight, which is to say alt text. If not, you need code 10 from code list 81, which is to say my book is made of text. And if you have a code from the list for images, like if you say my book has illustrations in it, you also need to have a code that says there's alt text for those images. Anything that is in the accessibility standards category will go here because meeting those accessibility standards means having alt text. Otherwise, your book needs code 10 from code list 81, and then those alt text codes if they're images. Now, this seems really complicated. I know I've just thrown like 900 codes at you and you're like, please. But if you take those steps using ACE by DAISY, it'll tell you to add these codes and you'll just end up here. Following those steps will let you land here regardless of whether or not you're like super paying attention to what the codes are. Okay, the very last one is appearance can be modified. This is it must not be fixed layout and it must have either code 10 from the accessibility list for no reading systems options disabled or codes 36 for all textual content can be modified. Basically what this code is saying, or what this filter is saying, is if you need to enhance the text to make it really big, if you need to change the font to a dyslexia-friendly font, if you need to flop it into night mode for your reading needs, this book will allow you to do that. And as you know, most EPUBs meet those qualities, right? So you're pretty much guaranteed to be in here if you've done the careful work of making a good EPUB. So anything that is already in accessibility standards that is not a fixed layout is going to be here. Fixed layout books immediately fall out of this category just by nature of being fixed, right? You can't change a fixed thing. Thus, the metadata needs to say that either the reading system's capabilities are unaltered, in other words, if your app can zoom, it won't stop you, or that all textual content can be modified. Again, if you take the steps to add your data from ACE by DAISY, it'll tell you to add these codes that you need where applicable. And if you're a Benetech certified publisher, you can just add the certification codes and you'll be on your way. Okay, that was a lot. I hustled through that accessibility piece because I know many of you are already doing that. If you are not doing it and you need help, once again, you'll never believe what I'm going to tell you to do. Paula's got these cool little confettis here. That's us. That's us really, really trying to get you to come to these workshops if you would like to. We will be working on accessibility metadata, and we'll be working on adding those thema codes. So bring your ISBNs, bring your ebooks, come hang out with me. We'll fix it. If you have already signed up, thank you. You'll receive an invitation to the meeting with a meeting link tomorrow. And if not, we will get one to you as soon as you sign up. Okay, now we're on to questions. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for listening to that quick and dirty set of instructions for two very different things that we will use to power our librarian filters. And if you have any questions, you can ask them now.
I will say, if you don't know where the hand up button is, it is under the React. No, and we have our first question from Tidewater Press. Go ahead.
I think you're muted.
Yes, thank you for that. That was very useful. I've got a couple of questions about process. The way I work at the moment is I use web form to create the basic entry, and then I export that to BiblioShare. I then transfer that over to eBound. But web form is very limited in terms of what you can add. Clearly, using CoreSource, you can add a lot more information using CoreSource. So would your best practice be to add all the metadata in CoreSource and export that as an ONX file and then upload it to BiblioShare? Would that be the best way to get the information to you?
Very good question. I'm thinking about it. I don't want to hustle into an answer. Are you an eBound client publisher?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
and I'm also
wonderful.
I'm also a Benetech certified.
Oh, that's great. Nice work. Okay, so in that case, I think your best bet would be to continue with your web form process. And then once the data is in CoreSource, go into CoreSource and add those extra pieces. Because it's easier to create the data the first time in web form. And then you go into CoreSource and add the extra pieces. At that point, or at any point in the future, email Emma. Is that correct, Paula? Is it Emma you'd email? Okay, email Emma and ask her if you are distributing your ebook metadata to BiblioShare from CoreSource. You may already be, and it's the same process as distributing to Apple or Kobo or Kindle. It's just that same distribution process.
Right, I understand. Thank you. I will do that. One second question is, Emma worked with CoreSource so that we could use a spreadsheet to add the accessibility metadata to via spreadsheet. What you have just outlined is not on the spreadsheet that Emma currently had, or the most recent one that I've got that Emma sent.
Oh no.
Is this something that Emma could perhaps adapt the accessibility spreadsheet, or are we just going to have to then manually add in those other ones to product features in CoreSource?
Absolutely not. I will fix that spreadsheet for you. Emma and I will work together to make sure that that spreadsheet reflects what we're doing here, and then Paula will send that out to the group. So I've made a note of that. I'll make sure of that. If you are using the spreadsheet, you may continue to do so.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
That's it from me.
Excellent.
Thank you. And now we have Kelsey from Freehand Books.
Hi, thanks you guys.
Hi.
So much information. I will have lots of questions at the upcoming workshop. So thank you very much for offering those. I was just thinking about the spreadsheet too, like my initial metadata creation, and I'm trying to remember and didn't pull it open. But can you add thema in that spreadsheet, or is this going to have to be in CoreSource?
No, you can absolutely add thema into the spreadsheet. It's a little bit of a pain because, of course, just like with BISAC, you add, or rather, unlike with BISAC, you have to add a new column for every thema code that you add. So you're going to end up with this like 9,000 row sheet, but it is easier than doing it manually.
Okay.
So yes, you can definitely do that.
Okay, thank you.
What I will say, as an aside for any CoreSource spreadsheet users, CoreSource is not yet on Thema 1.6. They've told me that they're looking into it for January. So there are some new codes from 1.6. 1.6 came out 2 weeks ago, so we're not too mad at CoreSource yet. There are some brand new codes that you may try to add with the spreadsheet, and they will not get added. That's just because CoreSource is not quite up to date yet, but they will be in early 2025. Okay. Sorry, that might have been way too much information for non-CoreSource, non-spreadsheet users, but. All right.
And we have another question from Ami from facets.
Yeah, sorry, I also use the spreadsheet. So you're
good.
gonna send out the spreadsheet to everybody. You're gonna fix it
I'll send out the
about the new
spreadsheet
one?
for everybody. I'll fix it up, and what I'll try to do is I'll highlight the columns that we need for this particular project, just so that if you're thinking about it, you can move through it more quickly. So Emma and I will work on that. I'll try to get it to you sometime next week.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Of course. Okay, well, if you have more questions, you of course can come to the workshops, and I do hope to see all of you at a workshop. You can also send me an email. I'm just going to put my email in the chat here. Thanks. That's very funny. Okay, my email is in the chat. You can email both Paula or I if you have any questions about this project at any point. And Paula has sent you those resource documents. Paula is the person to get in touch with for workshop signups. You'd think I'd remember how to say that after 1900 times. And as always, shoot me an email with any questions, and I'm always happy to help.
It looks like we do have one question in the chat.
Sorry.
Which is, so can we just add columns for thema to the spreadsheet and not mess it up?
Let me think about that for one moment. I'm envisioning myself doing this. I'm just going to pop open. I believe the answer to that question is yes. I feel very solidly that the answer to that question is yes. Where is my spreadsheet? There's 4 rows of subject, or maybe 3. You have to copy the whole block. This is something that we definitely bring this question to a workshop if you're able to make it. If not, I will highlight when I send out the new version of the spreadsheet, I'll highlight what needs to be copied in order to do multiple thema codes in the sheet. In that case, again, thank you all so much for coming. I'm so excited to see all of your books start showing up on the second phase of the CDLC 2. We think it's going to be really great. We think librarians are really going to love it. And we hope that it increases your sales to libraries. So I look forward to seeing you all at workshops.